But anyway, Yoruichi tells Ichigo about... Can I get a drum roll, please? Bankai!
Did that pick it up?
Yeah, it worked. That was perfect, thank you. They learn about Bankai. And I just wanted to talk about Bankai because I have a crazy number of things to talk about Bankai because I think it's a really good mechanic. But yeah, I think it's a good logical progression of Shikai, because like Shikai are basically like just upgraded versions of swords. Like because the regular sealed sword is just like a katana most of the time. I think other people have like somewhat different swords, but it's usually just a Japanese ninja sword. And then the Shikai just makes it like fancy, like makes it kind of unique. Like Ichigo gets a big sword, Renji gets a little whip sword. There's also like a staff or spear, just a special ability that they can do. And then I think Bankai is basically just a super form. But it's more interesting than a super form. It's more interesting than a super form because it has more of a logical progression. Like it's not like Dragon Ball where they just glow and now they're stronger, you know?
They punch harder.
Yeah, it's not that it's not that their sword just gets bigger, you know. It's the sword evolves in a unique and interesting way.
And a lot of the times they actually gain straight up new powers.
Yeah, like it's the thing I think is cool about it is that like you can kind of see like, oh yeah, you know, if you see someone Shikai and then you can see their Bankai, you can kind of see the relation. Like Renji, his Shikai is like a whip sword, and then his Bankai is a big giant dragon sword. So kind of like a similar concept, but just like on a way larger scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also like how consistent usually the idea of a Bankai is, where, like you said with Dragon Ball, they kind of have like Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, and they keep going with like every new kind of arc. And a lot of shonen, not just Dragon Ball, other shonen anime do that too, where like if it's a new arc, we got to give the characters new powers. But Bleach rather does it more just like, okay, in this arc, we're gonna show different characters Bankais.
Yeah, again,
I like a lot.
One of the benefits of just having such a large cast is like, even though we see like 15 Bankais in this arc, like we still don't know a lot of other people's Bankai. Like we never saw Soifon's a Bankai. We never saw most people's Bankai. Because they sometimes, okay, listen, most it's assumed that like, okay, Bankai is like a stronger version of the Shikai with like new abilities. Like again, Renji has a whip sword, and then his evolved version of that is a giant whip sword, i.e. a dragon. Basically just a giant whip sword. Same thing with Byakuya. He just has more swords and can do more things with them. But they do sometimes play around with those exceptions to like kind of throw you off. Like there are some Bankais that are like completely different from Shikai, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Ichigo's is the main example because
his gets smaller.
Yeah, his gets smaller. Because yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the fight. But yeah, it's a good throwing off of expectations, because you're like, oh yeah, you know, all the Bankais have been like these huge giant like monstrosities, like these big flashy attacks, and then Ichigo's seems to get weaker, and Byakuya doesn't even think it's a Bankai, but then we see like, oh, hold on a minute, it's sick as heck. And there are a couple of times that they do that throughout the series where they kind of like play with expectations, because again, most of the time there is a pretty straightforward correlation between Shikai and Bankai. But sometimes they do throw you for a loop, and I think the few times that they do it, it's really cool.
I also just want to say that I think, while it's cool to anticipate what the Bankai does, personally, I've always just been a fan of what the Bankai looks like, because a lot of the times, and I think by a lot, I think every single time, the Bankai does have like a very distinct appearance, and you get some cool sword designs all the time.
It's very like, again, a lot of the appeal of the series, especially on a first watch, is just seeing what everyone's cool swords do. Because, like, yeah, it is fun to see, like, what everything looks... Because it all looks cool. Like, you know, like, the dog has this giant, like, mech guy with a giant sword. Like, that's his Bankai. And, like, Mayuri is, like, this weird, creepy baby centipede thing. And the Byakuya is really cool looking. So, yeah. But, yeah, also, another thing I really like about Bankai is that it avoids the power creep because... Spoiler alert, there is nothing above Bankai. Like, there are some exceptions if you are the main character. Obviously, there are some exceptions if you're the main character, but like 99.9% of the time, like, Bankai is the most powerful that a character gets, you know? The show, I think, does a very good job of, like, avoiding the power creep because it's, for the most part, it's just like, okay, Bankai, that's it. Bankai versus Bankai is, like, as big as the show gets, but it's still good, because a lot of the reason that a lot of shows do have power creep is because you gotta keep escalating, but, like, you can go in a lot of different ways with the Bankai and all these other, like, special abilities, and, like, seeing them, how they interact with each other is really cool. So it has its advantage where, like, you know, even later on, you know, even with the most recent season, it's still cool to see people's Bankai because it's like, it's still like the most powerful thing that we have. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very difficult balancing game with like keeping Bankai interesting without just powered scaling it. And I think Bleach is very well written in the fact that it is able to keep Bankai interesting without power creep, you know? I think it's cool. And there's some power creep in other aspects of the show, but, you know, as far as like regular fights go. Again, if your name is Ichigo Kurosaki, you might get some exceptions, but again, most of the other characters in the show, Bankai is it. And I think that's really cool. And they do keep that consistent. They, not spoilers, but yeah, they do keep that pretty consistent. They don't have, like, this other people is like, oh, I'm more powerful than a Bankai.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say what I really like is Bankai is a very good like measuring stick for every other kind of like character that maybe isn't a Soul Reaper, right? About to like get into spoiler territory.
Yeah, Bankai is good. We like Bankai. We are Bankai enjoyers here.
Yes, sir.